Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 is the seventh film in this Mission Impossible franchise starring Tom Cruise. And the opening to this film, Dead Reckoning, is just like every other Mission Impossible film. It plays on your expectations because there's so many twists and turns that you don't know what to expect. You don't know what's going to happen next. There's this entity in this film that kind of reminded me of Skynet from the Terminator franchise. It's this AI system that's hacked into everything, and it's locked away in this submarine using two sets of keys that form into one key, and this is the MacGuffin that everyone is chasing. This AI system is so smart that it makes these people believe that there's an enemy sub on their radar, so that when they fire their missiles at it, it disappears off their system, causing the missile to turn around, and they end up blowing their own submarine up and killing themselves. So that was shocking, and it was very creative opening sequence. Did not expect that at all. And then, so we're introduced to Tom Cruise's Ethan Hunt, and he gets his first mission. This is when we learn information about his past and this guy named Gabriel, who is played by Issa Morales. And Gabriel ended up killing this woman who was important to Ethan. And they show this flashback with a young Ethan. They don't do CGI, which I'm glad they didn't do. But you see a young Issa Morales, but it doesn't look like CGI. It looks good. I don't know how they did that. And they don't show a young Tom Cruise. They hide his face using long hair, which I thought was creative. I accept that. But the thing that I don't accept is that this is the seventh film in this franchise, and you're just now mentioning this Gabriel character. And then he killed this random woman who we know nothing about. I really wish there was more information about this. I wish they had went further in depth with this whole storyline. I really wish it had tied in more to the first film with like Phelps. It could have been like Phelps' son or an associate or someone who was trained by Phelps, played by Jon Voight in the first film. That would have been cool, because the Gabriel thing, there just wasn't enough there for me. And this random woman, she's only in flashbacks, and we know nothing about her. But the reason why I kind of care about it is because, you've been watching the series. You see in the first film how Ethan's team died and he tried to save them, and throughout the series he's been trying to save Michelle Monaghan. So it's like, he puts his life on the line to save the people he cares about. So it's good that they mentioned that, but there just wasn't enough information there for me to really fully accept this whole Gabriel in this past situation. I thought that was kind of like just forced. There wasn't enough there for me. But Ethan's mission, is to go and take one half of the key from his former colleague Elsa Frost, played by Rebecca Ferguson. And he goes to the desert, and this kind of reminded me of his Mummy movie because they're in the desert, and it also kind of reminded me of Ghost Protocol when he was running in the sandstorm, because he's doing his mission, and all of a sudden, just by coincidence, here comes a sandstorm to interfere with the mission. So just a little nitpicking. I thought it was like, a sandstorm, but it was kind of cool. Elsa Frost ends up getting killed. Ethan Hunt takes her half of the key. Then we have a cool scene in this government facility where we see this government official played by Cary Elwes. And they're talking about the entity and how it works. And so Ethan Hunt infiltrates this meeting in a disguise, cool, creative scene. He throws his grenades, knocks everyone out, pulls off the mask. It reveals that it's Ethan. And we have a moment that goes back to the first Mission Impossible film, directed by Brian De Palma, with the Dutch angles, but there's no Dutch angles here, which is it would have been cool if they had thrown that in there, a little Easter egg. But they do little things here and there, going back to the first film, because when Kittredge and Ethan have their conversation, Kittredge is played by Henry Czerny. He's back. I'm glad to see him. They have their conversation. And going back to the first film, like when Kittredge looked at Ethan and said, "I understand you're very upset," and Ethan's like, "Kittredge, you've never seen me very upset." And this, in Dead Reckoning, Kittredge is like, "I can see you're upset." And Ethan's like, "This isn't me upset. This is me listening." So I like those little things. Going back to the first film. And then in this moment where Kittredge and Ethan are having their conversation, it's revealed that Ethan took Elsa's key, but he faked her death and told her to go ghost. So she's still alive. Then Ethan recruits his team, bringing back Luther, played by Ving Rhames, and Benji, played by Simon Pegg. And I love their dynamic here. You've been watching the series, they do great stuff here, and it just builds on from here. They have great moments, great chemistry together. So they go to the airport and they illustrate that, okay, there are these glasses that they wear that can track the key and locate it. And Ethan's like, yeah, we're going to go rogue doing this. You're going to be in danger. And Simon Pegg's Benji's like, oh, it's just another Monday for us. So I love the team dynamic here. They really feel like they're friends. And so they go to the airport. Ethan's tracking the key. And then we have Hayley Atwell, who plays Grace, who is a thief who has nothing to do with this mission. She's just some random person. She ends up pickpocketing the key, walking away. Ethan chases her down. And I love the chemistry between Hayley Atwell and Tom Cruise in here. I love how they play off of each other, how they try to one-up each other, a cat and mouse game. And I love how they also go back to the first film again, where you have, like in the first film when Ethan was playing with John Reno on the disc, he's like, is it this disc or is it that disc? And then he makes him disappear. And in this, he's playing with Hayley Atwell. It's like, is it this key or is it that key? And then it's some editing trickery, but I love the chemistry. So he makes the keys disappear, and I'm like, all right, whatever. But I love the chemistry between these two. And there's so much going on in the scene, because then we have Shea Whigham in here. And I love Shea Whigham because he's in so much stuff. He was in a couple of the Fast and Furious movies where he constantly gets the broken nose from Paul Walker. And then he was also in Kong Skull Island. And he was also in the Joaquin Phoenix Joker film where he played a detective. So I was like, as soon as I saw him, I was like, oh, hey, it's Shea Whigham. I like seeing him here. And he has a funny moment where he's chasing Ethan at the airport and they're watching the cameras and Luther's doing his thing on the computer, making Ethan's face. He's putting Ethan's face on different people. And Shea Whigham walks up to this guy and he turns him around and then he starts poking the guy's face thinking it's a mask. He's sticking his fingers in the guy's mouth. It's a very funny scene. And then you have Gabriel showing up here and he plants a bomb in a bag. And at first Benji pays it no mind. But then he goes back to it and they don't tell Ethan about it as he's doing his mission because they don't want to distract him. And so he finds the bag, he pulls out a bomb, and it asks him questions, and it's the Entity. And I thought the Entity was really cool. At first I thought it was kind of silly, like this is an AI system, Skynet, but it's like Tom Cruise versus AI, and this is really good. It's really good. As goofy as it is, it was interesting. It was interesting how they set it up. And so Simon Pegg, Benji pulls out this bomb, and it's the Entity asking him questions. And there's one moment where the bomb asks him, like, who do you care about the most? And Benji responds with, oh, I care about my friends. And so I thought Simon Pegg delivering his lines, and he was all sweaty and stuff, I thought that was really good, and further building his character and further building the relationship amongst these characters. And during that moment, like right when the bomb is about to go off, they tell Ethan about the bomb. And it's kind of funny because then Ethan's like, it's a bomb, it's nuclear, you should have told me about this a long time ago. So I thought that was funny. And then while Ethan's distracted, Grace ends up pickpocketing Ethan and one-upping him and taking the key and escaping. And then she gets away and Shea Whigham's chasing Ethan, and Ethan gets away and he climbs on the roof of the airport. And at this point, I was like, okay, they're gonna show an action scene. Ethan running on the roof of the airport. He's gonna jump on the plane and he's gonna get in the cargo area or something. But they didn't show it. So I figured, oh yeah, he's just very resourceful. He's gonna find a way to complete his objective. So then Grace ends up getting captured, and there's this moment where they give her a passport and she pulls a paperclip out of it, which leads into something later. And then they say this line, your lawyer's here to see you. And when they said that, I already knew it was going to be Tom. He shows up all suited and booted, looking all nice. And then there's this interesting sequence where Tom Cruise and Hayley Atwell end up getting handcuffed together. And like I said, I love their chemistry on screen. It just builds and builds and builds. Because then they end up getting handcuffed together. They get into a car and they're being chased by Gabriel's henchman, played by Palm Kamatiev. And she's chasing them in a Hummer. They're in this car, and Hayley Atwell is trying to drive, but she can't drive. So then Tom Cruise ends up driving, but then he has to maneuver it in a weird way because they're handcuffed. So it's very cool dynamics here. Then they park the car and they get a new car, but it's a little car and Tom Cruise doesn't know how to drive it. He crashes into a wall. It's very funny. It kind of goes on a little too long, but I think it's funny. It works. Then there's a moment where they end up rolling the car down the stairs while Tom Cruise is driving, but then when the car lands and it lands on the wheels, they end up switching places. So now Haley Atwell is in the driver's seat, and they have no time because Palm Kemetiev, she's driving down the stairs all vicious like and everything. And so then Haley's driving, and there's this one cool scene where they're in reverse and Palm Kemetiev is charging at them, and then they're working together here. Like I said, dynamics are great because then Haley Atwell, she's driving in reverse, and Tom works the shift, and then they spin the car around and they go in this tunnel, and then Haley Atwell's like, "Where are we going?" And Tom's like, "I have no idea," and they crash. Then she uses the paperclip she stole from earlier to escape from the handcuffs. So I love all these little things, very creative. Then all of a sudden, by coincidence, a train starts approaching, and he can't escape. So then he ends up taking the wheel off of the car, and now he has to track down Haley Atwell again. The one-upsmanship here. And the thing that I kind of didn't accept, but I thought it was creative, and eventually I believed in it, was how they explain the IMF and how everyone became an agent of the IMF. Which I'm like, this is the seventh film, and you're just now bringing this up. They never mentioned this, where it's like they all used to be in Haley Atwell's position. They all used to be just random common criminals until they were given the choice to work for the IMF. And at first, like I said, I thought that was a bit like, I don't know about this, but as it progresses and we build the characters and how the actors are performing their characters here, it works for me. Eventually, I believe in it. So then Tom, he goes to Haley Atwell and he says, "Listen, you're given the same choice that we had. You can either do something for the greater good, or you can just go down this dark path." And she's really hesitant about it at first, because then there's this moment where they go to this rave because, Haley Atwell's trying to sell the keys or something, and there's this whole thing that's building with these keys where it's like people don't know where this entity is. It's buried under the Arctic or something, under this ice. No one can get to it. No one knows where it is. People get a hold of the key. It's this ultimate power because the AI sees everything. Because at this rave, it's very creative and it's kind of creepy because you see all these LED screens. And it's the entity watching everybody. Like the entity, it's like this circular symbol, and you're just like, oh, these LED screens, it's just some screensaver. But no, it's the entity gathering information from everyone at the party. So it's like really cool and interesting and just odd. Because even earlier in the film, during the when Ethan throws the grenade and knocks everyone out, there's this guy who's saying like, yeah, social media, that's a service that works for us. So they kind of throw these little things in there, about the government spying on people, and you got the entity and it's watching people at this party. So I thought how they, as goofy as it is, how they executed it made me believe in it. It was well done. And so Gabriel shows up and he says to the White Widow, he says, who's played by Vanessa Kirby, he says to her, so either Elsa is going to die or Grace is going to die, and Ethan, you get to choose which one. And like I said, I love how they build that, because if you've been watching the franchise, you know how Ethan tries to protect the people that he cares about the most, but he's not always successful. So you're wondering what's going to happen. The suspense is building. And then Gabriel, they kind of throw a little doubt in there, especially towards the Grace character, because Gabriel says to Grace, well, he says he'll save you, but he's not going to. And, like I said, he's failed in the past, but he, don't believe Gabriel. Tom, he even says in the film, there's no place I won't go to track you down. I'll kill you if you hurt anyone. And then so the White Widow lets Gabriel go in this cool scene at the rave, and Gabriel is working with the entity, and he says, I know everything that's going to happen. The key will be delivered to me on a silver platter. And there's this cool action sequence where Gabriel's about to kill Grace, but then Elsa Frost shows up and they have this cool fight, and Tom is racing trying to get there, but he gets caught by Palm Kemetiev, and they have this fight in this narrow alleyway, and it's cool and creative, and he ends up whacking her head against this brick wall, and he spares her life. He doesn't kill her. He walks away and he races to go save someone. But it's too late. Gabriel ends up killing Ilsa Frost, and so she dies a second time. But when she died this final time, she has a knife in her chest and her eyes are open. I thought it was kind of sad because of how they build the suspense of Ethan racing, trying to save her. I thought that was very suspenseful. I was in it. I love it, as sad as it was. And so he tells Grace, he's like, I'm going to do whatever I can to protect you. I'm going to make sure of it. But like I said, you've seen the history in this franchise. He can make you a promise, but who knows if he's going to be able to keep it or not. And I love how this movie plays on that. Like, it's not the Ethan Hunt show, right? It's the team. The team, like Ethan gets out of situations by the skin of his teeth, or through just sheer luck, or through his team. And I love that dynamic in this film. Like, everyone is involved here. It's not just one person doing things. And I love how they give Haley Atwell's character a lot to do here and how they build her up, So they do this, they execute this mission, or they're supposed to go on this train and deliver the keys. And they're going to wear disguises. Grace is going to pretend she's the White Widow while Ethan pretends he's her brother. And they set up the whole thing, and it's like, this is how it's going to go down. But then, just like in these Mission Impossible films, something malfunctions, and they have to come up with things on the fly and be very resourceful. So the mask machine breaks down. Grace has her mask, but Ethan doesn't have his. So he can't go on the train with her. So he's like, all right, I'm going to come up with another way, but I'll be there with you. I'll protect you. So they're building the suspense. And she puts her mask on. They have this whole funny gag with the White Widow. And she's like falling unconscious and stuff. And the brother's all clueless and confused. And then Phelps is on the train. And they have a scene, and Ethan's trying to get to the train, but then Gabriel's on the train, and he causes the train to go off course, so it even further complicates the mission. And then so Ethan decides to jump off a cliff, and it's funny too because he first he reaches this point where he's supposed to get to, and he's like, I missed the train. And Benji and Ethan are arguing where it's like, hey, you need to go up here on top of the cliff, and Ethan goes up there, and then Benji's like, you need to jump off the cliff, and Ethan's like, what are you talking about? I need to jump. What? And it's very funny stuff. I love the dynamic here. So then Ethan's like, I need to get away from the cliff or get away from the mountain. So all the promotions, Ethan, Tom Cruise, crazy stunts, he drives off the cliff. And it would have been cool if it had been a POV shot, a continuous one take of him just jumping off the cliff, and then him like free diving towards the train, and him having perfect timing going towards the window. But they don't do that, and I feel like it would have been extremely complicated. But he dives off the cliff, and then they cut, and Grace is in disguise, and she's talking to Philip. She delivers the keys. He gives her the money, and then she's deciding whether she should accept it or not. And then she declines because now she's a full-blown good guy. She's working for the greater good. So she ends up pickpocketing the keys from Phelps. And I love, or she ends up pickpocketing the keys from Kittredge. And I love another thing in this film where they kind of throw these little sprinkles of like deception in there, where it's like, is Shea Wiggum evil? Like, because they say that whoever holds these keys hold the ultimate power, even though no one knows where this entity is. What would you do with that power? Like Shea Wiggum tells his partner in the film, what would you do if you had all that power? And then his partner's like, well, I think Ethan, he just wants to destroy it. And they like, I'm thinking Shea Wiggum's going to double cross, the agency, and he's actually working with the bad guy or something. Maybe it will happen in part one. They throw little shades of doubt in here, which I like. And then so they're on the train, and then Grace ends up taking back the key, and the White Widow walks into the room, and she's dazed and confused, and they're like, hey, there's two of you. And then the real White Widow, her brother, goes and tracks down Grace, holds her at gunpoint, saying, drop the key. And I'm like, just shoot her, but it's a movie. You can't do that. So she drops the key on the table, and then the brother has his henchmen go and retrieve the key. So basically, the brother's pointing a gun at his own henchman, and he tells his henchman to shoot her, and I'm just like, it's nitpicking, but it's like, come on, man. The way they set that up is just kind of silly. It's like you would have shot her a long time ago. And you giving Tom Cruise, Ethan, a chance to save her, because it's like I like it because it's like she's saving herself basically. And Tom Cruise, it's like it's another race to save someone he cares about. He ends up crashing through the window, knocking these people out. He's all dazed and confused, And then Gabriel, like he said, the key's gonna be delivered to me on a silver platter, because then he finds the key, and he ends up running away. Now before this, when they get on the train, there's another thing going down, where Cary Elwes, he's the government official, he shows up again, and he's on the train, and he's like, I know the location of the sub. So only two people know. It's Gabriel and the government official. And there's this moment where Gabriel, he's like, you know the location. And then Cary Elwes is like, yes. Gabriel slices his throat. And he looks at Palm Kamatiev and he says, oh, Ethan saved your life, so you're going to help him later. And he ends up stabbing her. And when he did that, I was kind of confused, because I was like, the way this was constructed is a little sloppy. Because Palm Kamatiev shows up to Cary Elwes's room and then kills all of his henchmen, and then opens the door for Gabriel to let him in, and then Gabriel kills Cary, and then he stabs his own henchmen. And I'm just like, I don't know, it's just kind of sloppy to me, because it was just kind of, I thought it could have been executed a little better. It's just a little sloppy, because then that comes into play later. So Ethan and Grace end up Grace tries to stop the train while Ethan and Gabriel are fighting on top of the train, and it goes back to the first Mission Impossible film where John Voight and John Voight and Tom Cruise were fighting on that train. So that's cool going back to that. And they're fighting, and it's really cool and intense, because they're trying to, like, as they're fighting, they're dodging all of these obstacles and everything. It's really cool. And then you're thinking, okay, this is part one, right? It's going to be like all these other movies like Infinity War and the recent Fast X movie, where the villain wins and the heroes die. They already killed Elsa. And so I'm like, Gabriel, he's going to escape with the key, and then we lead into part two. But no, they didn't do that. Ethan Hunt still wins because they're fighting on the train. And then Gabriel's like, I know the location of the entity, and before they do this, they set this up where Luther tells Ethan, okay, don't kill Gabriel. He sets up all these objectives, and you're like, something's gonna go astray, we don't know what's gonna happen. And then Gabriel's smiling at Ethan like, I know where the entity is. And then Tom, he just wants to destroy it, so he wants no one to know, so he's about to stab Gabriel in the neck. And then Issa Morales is acting, because his facial expressions are really good, because he's smiling at first, and then when he's about to get stabbed, his face is like, oh, he's like, he has a concerned look on his face, like, what are you doing, you're about to stab. And then Shea Wiggum shows up like the fugitive, like, put that gun down. And they're on the train, and then Gabriel escapes. He has this timing perfectly. He leaps off the train onto a bed of a truck, and I'm thinking he has the key. Looks into his pocket, he's like, nope, I don't have the key. And then he ended up planting bombs on the bridge of the train, on the tracks. Blows it up. And at this point now I'm like, okay, this has kind of reminded me of the Lost World Jurassic Park, when the trailer was going over the cliff. It's the same thing. So the train, as one car goes off of the tracks and into the river, and I think they shot some of this for real. It's like a video game. The car of the train is hanging over the cliff, and as they're climbing upward to go into another car, as soon as they get out of that car, it detaches itself and it falls into the water. And they do this like 2 or 3 times, to where it's kind of silly and goofy, but I love how it's executed, because then there's a moment where they get into one car and there's this grand piano there, and it's about to fall. And I love the acting from Haley Atwell here, where Tom is standing on this board and he's like, all right, I'm about to jump over there. And then Haley or Grace grabs Tom, and then he's just like, no, let me jump over there. And she does this quite a few times. You see her eyes watering and everything. It's very good. And then so he leaps over to the other side, and then he reaches out. He's like, jump, I'm gonna catch you. And right in the nick of time, as soon as the grand piano falls, she leaps over, he catches her, but then they're about to die. They're not gonna make it. And then all of a sudden, Palm Kamatiev shows up and saves the day. And like I said, I just wish that could have been executed a little better. And then Palm Kamatiev just ends up dying anyway after she saves them. And then there's a moment where Shea Wiggum shows up at gunpoint, and there's only one parachute, and so Ethan's like, all right, I gotta jump. And Grace accepts it and says, okay, yeah, go and save the day. And he jumps with the parachute and meets up with his team. And now part two is on to find the submarine and the entity and destroy it, and the ultimate showdown between Gabriel and Ethan. And this movie, I thought it was really great. It is a great movie with creative action sequences, great performances from everyone, great chemistry amongst all of the actors here. I believed in their characters. I love the dynamics between the characters here. It was all good. As silly and as goofy as some of this stuff is, I believe that the way it's executed, how it's constructed, the way it's crafted, it's masterful. I believe in it. I get sucked into it. As goofy and as silly as all of this is, I believe in it. That's all I have to say.